All right, everybody, welcome to Hardpoints, episode 19. And it's your podcast about energy, security, and the startup economy, and of course, how they intersect to shape the world around us. Each week, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neal, how you been, bud?
I've been doing all right. It's been a wild time. Fundraising continues, but the weekend was good and lots of good family time. How about you, man?
I've been good. I've been good, kind of end of the summer here. I've been having a hard time sleeping for some darn reason. So,
Oh,
I'm not really thinking about bed at bedtime, too much about what's happening in the world around me, but for some reason, I'm just not getting a good night's sleep every night.
do you think something, is it around here? Sometimes it can be the heat, but it sounds like maybe you got something going on, like the back of your mind eating at you.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. Like, our performance this quarter has been a little softer than I wanted. And I'm not totally confident that we're understanding why that is, which is not awesome. So there's that. But on the flip of it, it's just also been hot. We have had a kind of a lot of summer heat here. And one of the things I've always liked about Denver is that it almost always gets down into the mid 60s at night. So you should be able to open up your window. We have a whole house fan. It helps to kind of keep things cool. But for whatever reason, it has not been doing that here. And so it's a little bit warmer too. And so having to maybe potentially run the air conditioning instead of the fan. So maybe I just need to kind of suck it up in the changing climate here and turn on the AC.
Yeah, I mean, little things can change the sleeping dynamic. I'm blessed in that I get really good sleep. I know a lot of light sleepers, but the one time I can't sleep is when it's hot. So I think last night was the second night this year we've actually had to run the AC because similar Southern California, it gets cool at night and you like open up the windows and then it's nice and quiet too. So I don't like when the AC is running.
Yeah, it's unfamiliar territory for me. Like when I was a kid and like when I was in the military, oh my God, could I sleep?
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, what did you get anything done this weekend? Anything good?
Yeah, we had a little bit of fun. Fun's maybe not quite the right word, but I enjoyed it. So my son, he's getting bigger and bigger into Scouts, and the troop is, it's a volunteer organization, so it's not, it doesn't run like a Swiss watch. And so I found out on Tuesday at the kind of the weekly Scout meeting that Luke had signed me up for an Eagle Scout project on Saturday morning for him and me to go to. Moreover, that project was 2 hours away up near Leadville, and it was like trail maintenance. And so the plan for everybody was to go up Friday night, sleep through the night, and then wake up and then, get to work in the morning. But we had an existing commitment Friday night. So that meant getting up at 5 a.m. In order to hit the road, in order to be there for doing this work at 8 a.m. But I really liked it. It was trail. Yeah, it was trail maintenance. Doing some maintenance on some hiking trails. There's actually a section of the Colorado Trail and the Continental Divide Trail. And so, it's hard to be really that upset when you're out in the sunshine, in the woods and doing a little bit of physical labor. So, it was good. I actually really enjoyed it.
That leads me into believing or thinking about this. Two things. One is watching a TV program on Friday after work. There was a Stanford professor talking about some alternative medicine kind of things, like wake up in the morning and look at the sun, look as close to the sun as you can. It'll give you more energy. And this was like pretty kooky stuff, but the guy's from Stanford and he's pretty smart. And what it got me thinking, so maybe a theme of the weekend, I guess, was the sort of, we need some of us need, I don't know if everybody needs, but I need, sounds like you do too, some time outside, away from the laptop, away from writing emails and stuff like that. And so one of the things we did this weekend, I actually purposely took the boys, we just hung out, we took a blanket to the park and we were just outside for a couple of hours, and that was phenomenal. So we didn't fix any trails, but I just liked being outside. So maybe there's some relation there.
Yeah, absolutely. funny enough, so I took my daughter to go watch the new Superman movie in the theaters yesterday, as well as the other thing we did this weekend. And there was several times in there where Superman is healed by the rays from the yellow sun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so like there's a little something in there for all of us, right? Which is go get a little bit of
Mm.
sunshine. I've always been one too that like, man, I got to be working. I don't know what it is about like. I think
Physical work.
yeah, just it helps. Yeah, I've got like the body of a
Yeah.
peasant, which is like I think I'm at my healthiest when it's just like carrying heavy stuff for a while. Um, so
That's funny.
yeah, so
Well, I can relate in that, like, remember I got to go sailing, a month and a half ago now. And I will say my body was just a little happier because it wasn't a lot of physical work. You got to move the sails around and pull on the ropes and this and that, but just like not standing in front of a computer. I stand. I don't sit a lot, but I stand. Maybe that's also part of it. But anyway, this was just like being outside, physical work, even if it wasn't a lot of it. So there you go. Like, I came away from that. My whole body was just more like energized, ready to go, even though I hadn't done anything that strenuous.
yeah. Um, I don't know what it is, man. It's just it's part of the human condition. We're all just I don't know if I've ever shown you it, and maybe I have, which is the case for my phone. I'm gonna hold that up to the
Mm.
camera here real quick and just describe it for everybody. So if you can see it, it's a chimp in a
Uh-huh.
suit, right? Looking quite,
Yeah.
profound in his gesture of holding his head up to up into the right. And I just think
Uh-huh.
that's who, I think sometimes we forget really that we're nothing more than just a bunch of fucking monkeys in suits, and that we like to think that we're always thinking with our forebrain and that everything is like super logical, but really we're just, we're about like 2 degrees of separation away from flinging shit at each other, like literally. And the more that we get
I-
outside, move those mammalian bodies of ours, and engage in
yeah.
being outdoors and in the woods, like the happier our little monkey minds are.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, this goes back to the Stanford professor. I am not smart enough on any of this stuff, but it got me to start wanting to learn more about those mind body connections that, Western medicine generally doesn't. And look, Western medicine does a lot of great things. I'm not suggesting I'm going to go off into Neverland here, but I think bringing up some connections back to what we're discussing here and understanding that stuff a little better is probably to our benefit. So anyway, I'm just sort of a curiosity of mine. I'm gonna dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Well, you want to talk to about kind of the first story of the day here?
Yeah. So if you've been watching the news, there are now troops, specifically National Guard troops, deployed in Washington D.C. This is in the context of Trump and his allies suggesting that crime in Washington D.C. has gotten out of hand. I think it was specifically motivated by one of his staff, who goes
Old,
by the name of Big Balls.
old big balls.
Old Big Balls got carjacked, and like I think we talked about this before. And carjacking is awful. I've actually lost a friend of the family to carjacking. It is awful. Um, and it happens more than you might think. I live in a very safe neighborhood. I live in, suburbia. Carjackings aren't super common here, but I guess they are in the cities because, 500 or 600 of them happen every year in DC. So that's a lot. Anyway, now we have, scenes of federal troops, in DC in military uniform, walking in DC. And, the reports are that, crime is way down. It's a week, but crime is down, and now we're in the sort of a position where you either argue that crime is fine and therefore troops shouldn't be allowed, or you argue for troops in the streets because crime is bad. It's I don't know how you have this argument without um you know without acknowledging that crime is bad and that we all want it to be lower, and then in the same breath, maybe saying, U.S. troops deployed against our own citizens is problematic. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's bullshit. Like, Trump was looking for a reason to do this for any old reason. You know, yeah, sorry, Big Balls, the guy that, kind of, just for background, if people have been following the Big Balls saga, which is Big Balls was the self-given nickname to a 22, I think, year old staffer that was working in the kind of the Doge, kind of destroying a lot of people's lives in the name of quote government efficiency, but not really achieving that. It was kind of the reason his moniker came to light was it was just a show of how unserious the people were that were being employed by Doge in order to be able to do this. These weren't. It was a young man that was acting like a boy rather than like a man. That said, he doesn't deserve to get beat up. He doesn't deserve to have his car stolen. Like, no, that's not how civilized society works. He's an asshole. And a child, thrown into the deep end of the pool here, but that doesn't mean he deserves to get beat up. So, like, right off the top. But it was just an excuse. And so one of the things that, like, the thing that kind of really concerns me here is that, like, so DC is special because it's federal land. It doesn't belong to any state. And so, like, there's unique authorities that the federal government has in order to be able to execute there. They don't need permission of the state government in order to do that. But nonetheless, it was a pretense. And one of the things that, like, I look at here is how willing and quick people are from other states, specifically the governments of some of these red states, mostly in the South, to deploy troops to a city that it isn't in their own state. And that starts to give me a little bit of pause. It really also starts to really bother me on the fact that, like, I'm not hearing any military leaders speaking up for, like, okay, how many times are we going to be doing this, folks? Why are we coming up with, like, these made up reasons? Because at its core, I think I'd have to double check it, but I feel like I remember reading something along the lines of, like, the DC has half of the murder rate of like Alabama. Why are we not deploying troops to Alabama? Why are we deploying them to DC? Yeah, crime's bad, but yeah, of course, if you impose martial law, maybe that's too strong of a word, but of course, if you, like, put troops into a city and rapidly, increase the police presence, then, like, you're going to have an effect on
Yeah.
crime.
Yeah, it's not martial law, but it feels a lot like it. I think, yeah, to your point of, like, why is it not Alabama? Because he's trying to make a statement, I guess. You asked me this last episode. You're like, why would he be doing this? Epstein, that's why he's doing it. Because he doesn't want to talk about Epstein. He wants to talk about anything else. He wants to talk about Iran and Russia and Putin and not Epstein. But here we are. I mean, I think if you want crime to be low, we all want crime to be low. Like, if you acknowledge that the murder rate, even if it's down 30% from last year, which it is, it's still too high. We all agree there shouldn't be any murders. I think the question is, what's the price you're willing to pay for that? What's the price you're willing to pay for the crime rate to be zero for a week or a month? I mean, it's not going to be zero forever. So at some point, like, what is it worth? There's no right answer to that. It's just a judgment call. And I think there are people that are, good faith arguments can be put, in my opinion, on the, well, we have to do something different side of the argument. If this was any other administration, I'd be like, yeah, okay, try something different. But this is in the context of Trump, who's clearly got authoritarian leanings and clearly done other things like, arrest people without due process and ship them to countries where the people that have been arrested don't have any resources to defend themselves. If that, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If that doesn't scare the shit out of you, you're just not paying attention enough. And so this isn't done in a vacuum. I'll just finish there. It's like, if it were any other administration trying to think creatively, I'm like, okay, yeah, like, let's think creatively about how to fight crime and do this differently, knowing that we're going to, like, upset the balance of freedom to low crime. But because it's Trump, I'm like, fuck, no, like, he's already made too many steps in the authoritarian direction for me to be.
Yeah. And I mean, let's also put a very fine point on it. Those people that are getting to, that are being snatched and grabbed off of the streets without due process and then sent away, some of them including people here with legal status and or an American citizen, they're being sent to foreign torture camps in El Salvador. Like, let's just be fucking bluntly clear here. The guy is an authoritarian. He has no problem using force in order to be able to do that. One of the people that he illegally snatched, the courts said he had to release. He re-snatched today, right? So like the guy was out 24 hours, was showing up to court as required to, as part of kind of like his being re-released there, and snatched again. Snatched at court, adhering to the law. But I disagree with you on this one. If this were any other administration, I would also have a problem with this. Like this, there's a difference between when a police force has been overwhelmed, by riots, right? When a police force has been overwhelmed by riots, and you need to, in order to kind of use, some of those civil authorities of the National Guard in order to kind of restore order and let the police force kind of get back on top of it for domestic control. Okay, I get that. Notably, this asshole didn't do it on January 6th.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right.
There was a riot.
The irony there is so deep. The irony is so deep.
There was a riot where the local police force was being overwhelmed by a mob incited by the current president himself, president at the time himself, in order to violently attack police officers and desecrate, the Capitol.
And he Congress didn't call for the National Guard.
Exactly.
And he didn't do it.
And I know all sorts of assholes will claim it's like Nancy Pelosi or something, like has something. No. The president had the authority. This is, again, in D.C., has the ability in order to quell that. He didn't want it to go away. This is straight up authoritarian horseshit. And I wouldn't accept it from any other administration, even if they were less authoritarian in their tendencies than this. Like, I wouldn't accept it from George W. Bush or Barack Obama.
Yeah.
No, this is just out of line.
This is what I put in a good faith argument on both sides. Like I've been trying to put myself in the shoes of those military commanders, or let's just say JD Vance or Hegseth or any of the other leadership around him. Maybe I'm being too empathetic here because maybe I should just be like, oh, those guys are all just assholes. I start from a place where I think most of them have convinced themselves they're doing the right thing somehow. And their good faith argument is this is a necessary part of rebalancing that equation of too much crime versus not enough freedom, and that's where I am trying to be understanding of their side of the argument. I too would not. My personal view, and I've said this before too, is like those streets belong to the citizens. And nobody can, this is like foundational to America. The reason why we don't have, check your papers laws and checkpoints laws is because the streets belong to the citizens.
Because we're not the fucking Soviet Union, goddammit. Like this is supposed to be the freest nation on earth. Anyways.
Right. You can walk down the street without asking permission. The inverse of that is not true. Like, I don't have to ask for permission from the government to walk down the streets. These are my streets. I get to walk down these streets until I do something that harms somebody else or causes, probable cause, or I would say there's an official legal term there. It's not probable cause, but like suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is the police standard. So I don't know that we disagree. I think what's happening here, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that if you're on the other side of the equation and you want the balance to come back, like less crime, and you're willing to give up more freedom than I am, maybe you could make an argument. But that's what I'm saying. Like, even in this context, you're like, my conservative buddies are not worried about this. And this is just, I don't know how much they have to convince themselves that this is not concerning. But when you add this on top of railroading universities and railroading law firms and taking away, and creating a masked police force and cozying up to Putin, I mean, you just add it to the list of all the other shit. They continue to add like reasons why this is okay and this is not concerning. And I don't know what point it gets to be too much for people. I don't know if it ever does, but I mean, at some point, hopefully it does.
Yeah, I was reading a little something online about like, uh, there's kind of like three different ways when people are just like not tuned into fucking reality and they're not willing to believe it. Um, and so the first one, which is to just completely cut them out of your life because like they'll fucking exhaust you with the whole thing. The other one is to kind of keep arguing about reality and to be like, no, you really do need to pay attention. This is what's happening. Um, and I'm kind of in that camp. And the third way is just refuse to talk about anything political with them if you want to kind of maintain the relationship and just say, hey, whenever you're ready to leave the cult, I'm here for you. But until then, like, we're not talking about this. And like bluntly, let's talk about some cult-like behaviors. I was talking to a guy that I used to fly with, former squatter mate of mine, again through social media, and it was on somebody else's post, but it was about just this topic. And it was the idea that why are we deploying troops to DC? Crime rates down. And this guy came on and he was arguing about like the original post. And it was something that I also shared myself was uh, imagine being a National Guardsman having to walk around DC and realizing that like the homeless that you're going to go in prison are, by and large, there's a disproportionate number of veterans in there. Right? Like think about like the psyche of being like a National Guardsman doing military duty and recognizing that you're rounding up vets in order to potentially like forcibly remove them, put them someplace, like, steal a lot of their rights, at best. And so anyways, this former squad roommate was commenting about like, well, yeah, we need to do something about homelessness. And I was like, we should help them. And I'm like, you think this is helping them? Like, under what? I've done work with homeless vets before. If you want to have that conversation, dude, I'm all fucking in. Absolutely. Let's do something about the homeless population, especially the disproportionate number of veterans that are in that population. But if your solution is to deploy the National Guard in order to forcibly remove them from, Washington, D.C. and or throw them into jail or prison, like, you're not helping shit. I just can't understand like this lie that he tells himself. Like, what is the propaganda channel that is causing him to like so tightly associate with the cultists of that bullshit?
Well, I guess my reasoning, and it's just that, is look, the border did get out of hand. And so the masked ICE agents maybe just, in their minds, it's like, well, the border's out of hand. We had to do something. Crime is out of hand. So we got to do something. And, just plussing up the police force wasn't working. Well, I find a bunch of arguments in all these things, but, and Putin, well, we got to end the war in Ukraine, and Ukraine, we have to go to where the leverage is. And so just do whatever you can. I'm going through my previous list of like all the shit that he's done. Oh, the deporting people without due process. Well, those are obviously bad people. And, you're not going to get picked up by those, that process. Of course, you just present your driver's license, keep going. No problem. So there's rationality on all of these things. And I'll go back and blame the Democrats again. They still don't have their shit together, where the border did get out of hand, and they did let, like, veteran homelessness has been bad and hasn't been fixed. I don't know. I mean, you can point to things where, like, if the other side, meaning the left had better solutions to some of these things, then, sometimes we give Trump credit for doing things a little different. And I appreciate doing things a little different. I just, maybe as an American citizen, I demand that it be done within the confines of the Constitution. Like, do all sorts of different stuff. Cool. Just do it within the Constitution.
Yeah, man, I won't, sit here and defend the Democrats aren't a little bit feckless to a certain extent, but also let's be honest. They're playing by a different set of rules than what the Republican Party has been playing by. They had to adhere to the Constitution and about like the rule of law. That is not something we've been forcing Republicans to do for a while. Right now, like, Trump pardoned a whole bunch of January 6th people, and then he put some of them into positions of power. Right now, he pardoned a criminal, his son-in-law's father, and then made him the ambassador to France. He was just recalled as the ambassador to France by the president of France. Like, there's just like a different fucking set of rules. And so, like, if Republicans can grind the gears of government to fuck it all up, and then we say it's all the Democrats' fault, like, it's really shifting the blame from the people that are really grinding the fucking gears, destroying the machine for their own purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my buddies in the White House back 10 years ago, actually said, this was 10 years ago. He said to me, he was like, there's one party that's really focused on getting power. There's another party focused on using power. The Democrats, I blame them because if there were a better response, the voters wouldn't. I mean, just look at the voter registration. This also came out this week. That voter registration in the 30 places where we can measure it is down in the Democratic Party by 2.5 million and up by some measure in the Republican Party. I think the Democratic Party has to pay attention to that the fecklessness, as you said, is really coming home to roost. And the voters are not happy with the solutions that have been provided or been offered. And they have until this last week with Gavin Newsom trying to, update the maps of California, have been, they go low, we go high. I think those days are over, man. I'm fully on the train of like exercise power when you've got it, find ways to get that power and then use it. 'Cause it's at this point, we keep going down this path. The Republican Party is not, they're violating norms. Like, there's nothing you can do about that, but they're now clearly pushing the bounds of upending the Constitution, pushing the bounds. Haven't done it yet, but lots of indications that they're going in that direction. That's what I'm worried about, is like this punch counter punch of like the Democrats had shit on offer. They therefore embolden the Republicans to have really good arguments for stuff that needs to be fixed, and people are willing to accept really extreme solutions, bring those fixes, quote unquote fixes.
Yeah, I mean, it's Mussolini's making the trains run on time. It's the fascist playbook every time, is that you have a party that thinks that they're playing by one set of rules, and they haven't realized that actually what they are is in a bare knuckle fight for power and kind of the future of the country. To that point, and another news item that came into here was about John Bolton, the former national security advisor for Donald Trump in his first administration, had his house invaded by the FBI for looking for different materials. This is kind of a mess. It's also a big problem. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. Just to push back on your previous point just slightly here, which is no. Like we are seeing not just breaks in norms, but breaks in like constitutional authorities here that are just not being enforced. This is an example of one of them, going after a now political opponent, even though he was originally a political ally. What do you think about that, Neal?
I mean, it's so hypocritical. Not that they give a shit about hypocrisy at all. I think what they've figured out, they being the administration, the Republican leadership, is that most of America isn't really paying attention. They're kind of trying to get their kids to soccer practice on time. A lot of people believe that Trump was unfairly targeted. That case, the one that actually he got convicted of, was probably wouldn't have been brought against him if he wasn't a political figure. It's probably true. I think that's probably right. That would have just been another white collar crime that a rich person got away with. But there was a prosecutor in New York who saw an opportunity to. So this isn't, I think, we don't know because they haven't unsealed what the charges against Bolton are. I suspect it's very much in the same realm of like, hey, you did this wrong. In a normal time, you wouldn't be targeted, but because you're a political enemy, you are going to be targeted. I'll say two things. One, just very clearly, the The irony of like Trump had classified documents. This is a supposition. We don't know what he had, but it's probably like he has classified documents in his basement. He's an old guy. Most old guys carry paper and probably has like, that's just my guess. I have no idea. But like the FBI asked Trump to return his classified documents for like a year. I think it was like 18 months. And Trump just ignored it. And then the FBI was kind of like, well, dude, we can't like not come get these documents. We have now proof. Well, anyway, so like the irony that this is the thing they're probably going after him for is ridiculous. Two is that I 100%, let me just say for the record, I'm pretty convinced that Trump was targeted because of his political status. Okay. But this is like the president going after a person. This isn't like a prosecutor at York taking an opportunity. So I'll start with those two things. And I'll just let you respond to those two. I've got more, but those are the two things.
Yeah, the things that I think about when you talk about like he was targeted. So there's one thing about like if you have evidence, and if I remember in the New York case, I think it was the attorney general there's named Letitia James, if I remember. I think she ran a grand jury, right? Which is a legal process that says, oh, is there enough evidence in order to kind of prosecute on this? Now, I think it's bullshit that white collar criminals get away with crime all the fucking time. And when they do get caught, like they get like lesser sentences, even though that like the amount of money that they steal could be exponentially larger than like, what a common, kind of street criminal would do. And, in the case of the Sacklers can kill literally thousands of people.
Millions
of people.
Yeah.
And they're not even facing prison time. Right. So absolutely. There's like, we need to be talking about that. And so I don't have a whole lot of sympathy that like this particular white collar criminal, actually got, held to a standard where all the rest of them didn't. I want them all to be held to that standard.
And to that point, like if anybody's upset about this, if the, half the country who ordered or like who voted for Trump is upset about this, he told everybody what he was going to do. This was in his playbook, in his campaign. This is, I am your retribution. He told us all he was going to do stuff like this. So nobody should be surprised. But sorry.
Yeah. So it's one thing to like, you could call it like targeted, legal enforcement, right? And then, maybe you got a claim to that, right? But it's a totally different thing to, before there's even evidence of the crime necessarily, is to do a targeted using the executive branch, not the legal system, in order to go into somebody's home and to go seek evidence associated with that. And so I would want to see what evidence they had, what probable cause that they had for doing that. But again, I don't trust him. I don't trust Kash Patel. I don't trust any of the people that are doing this. This is a reason that like the attorney general is supposed to be separate, is supposed to be running differently. Now I know the Kennedys, you had Bobby and JFK. And so there were like some things, but we were supposed to have learned the lessons about like how not to abuse power, not to like use it, as like how to better abuse power. And that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, the other excuse I hear a lot from my buddies is, well, Biden weaponized Justice Department. He went after Trump. I'm like, yeah, but didn't you just say 5 minutes ago that Biden was out of his mind and not really in charge because he was too old and senile? Like the arguments. Anyway, that's.
But I don't buy that either. Biden didn't weaponize it. Like Trump committed crimes in public. Just because they're crimes in public doesn't mean that they're not crimes. Like he committed like. To not enforce the law when the guy is like saying that, like I can get away with it. I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it and literally like go do things like that. Like there's still crimes. That's not weaponization. That's just being held to account for that's consequences of your actions.
Oh yeah. Well, the one that should have gotten brought didn't get brought, but anyway, I'm just saying there's irony and hypocrisy in all of it. And I at least try to hold some consistency in my argumentation.
Yeah. But, what I look back is like to the, Don Trump is keeping like nuclear secrets in his fucking spare bathroom. Right. And we like in order to avoid like seeming like they were going after him for too long, They let him run out the clock. They took 4 years to prosecute him and then let the guy get elected so he could get away with it, rather than being like, I would actually flip it. He didn't weaponize it. He actually didn't hold a criminal who did it in public and challenged everybody to do. He didn't hold somebody to account. That was actually justice denied to the public. Nuclear secrets, all sorts of nuclear secrets, and the guy is doing it again.
Oh, he's doing it again. He is. To bring it back, you mentioned grand jury. I will say that there two judges looked at this and said there was enough evidence to do these raids. One at his office, but Bolton's office, one at Bolton's home in Maryland. That's why I started with, we don't know what he did. It's probably having some secret documents in his basement, which he should not have.
Nope.
But also, we come back to, he wouldn't be targeted unless he was, on ABC the week before telling Trump that he was a vocal critic of the Trump Putin summit, where Putin walked away with basically everything he wanted and Trump got nothing.
Yep. I also say that here, John Bolton's a particularly unsympathetic character, because he's just always been that jerk. For me, I think this should be a cautionary tale to everybody else that's in the government, or frankly, everybody, which is that John Bolton knew that the president in his first term had been leveraging his position in order to try to dig up political power against political secrets against Joe Biden from the Ukrainians. Mm-hmm. John Bolton had an opportunity at the president's first impeachment to say so publicly.
Oh, that's right.
And he didn't.
I forgot about that.
And he didn't. Yeah. John Bolton had a chance not only to save himself, apparently later when he finally had this change of conscience and conscience and to start standing up. He had a chance to do the right thing then, and he missed his chance, and he let the asshole get a little bit more power and avoid consequences one more time. Everybody that keeps making these moral compromises, you're missing the point. You are losing the opportunity to actually stop this in the future. The time for moral compromise, in my opinion, is past. No more moral compromises. They're only going to use that because this seems reasonable, rather than this is what needs to happen.
Man, I forgot. That's a good one. I forgot about that Bolton. He was a guy in the room that could have spoken to that. It just didn't. All right. So, pivoting from that into the next area of concern, I know we're supposed to be talking about energy, national security, and the startup economy. I think all of this is national security related. This one is kind of also related to energy, but mostly still national security. And it is that the U.S. government is now, Intel's in trouble, right? Intel's one of the premier U.S. technology companies over the last half century. It produced most of the chips that went into the early PCs. And when I say the early PCs, your laptop probably has an Intel chip in it, or at some point in your life over the last 5-10 years, you've had a laptop that's had an Intel chip in it. So one of the most prolific companies, but it's getting its butt kicked by NVIDIA and other chip makers around the world. So they're in trouble. And the U.S. government now has said that is a part of the bailout, like the auto industry got during the Obama administration. The Trump administration, I think, is rightly taking a look at whether or not the U.S. government has a role to play in keeping Intel alive. But what's really odd here is that they're not talking about just a bailout. They're talking about a bailout that includes an equity ownership, meaning ownership of Intel, like a 20% ownership of one of the U.S.'s premier technical institutions, companies, whatever. And again, this just sort of reeks of authoritarianism. Like, the Chinese government owns companies. Like the Chinese version of Intel, the Chinese government owns. You know who else owns parts of companies in their, the key companies in their economies? It's like Russia and Nigeria and Venezuela. And you know who doesn't own parts of the key companies in their country is, Spain, France, Germany, the UK, Australia, and so far the United States. And so again, you're like, Trump just does things differently, man. He wants, he's squeezing like nickels out of everybody, and it's great. But do we really want the U.S. government owning big chunks of U.S. private companies?
Yeah, so obviously it gets down to the core of like, why does anybody care? First of all, about Intel, if this was, I don't think, the U.S. government, even under the Trump administration, would be buying like Joann's fabric is going under, right? Like they're not going to buy, 20% of Joann's fabric. And the reason they're doing that is the underlying reason is the idea that there are certain industries that are vital to national security, and that term gets abused. But clearly, Joann's fabric is outside of that, that realm, and Intel is inside. Unintentionally, I just repeated one of their old marketing campaigns. Intel and
yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And Intel was a huge company. Like I think at one point they had something like 90% like chip share within the United States. I mean, it was just bananas how big those guys were. So there's other companies that are kind of like this. The U.S. maintains auto manufacturing and ship making capacities in order to, in the times of war, build tanks and Navy ships. We keep up. We buy very, very few airplanes from overseas because we need to have airplane manufacturing capacity. Central to all those things in the modern world, especially in our, current Ukrainian war mindset of about like how many smart little machines need to be kind of all over the place, especially with AI, is the capacity to design and manufacture silicon wafer microprocessors. That's what Intel does. It is a key function that the U.S. needs to retain in the form of private industry. That's why we spent a lot of money on the auto bailouts in 2008 in order to kind of keep them, because again, auto manufacturing in the United States is necessary to the security of the United States moving forward. That said, we've never done this before where the government's bought a chunk of a company in any way sort of like that. And it's worth pointing out the definition of socialism is where the government owns the means of production. So we are now, through Trump, actively engaging in socialist behavior, right? Now, we could argue about that to a certain extent, which is that like the government has been propping up a lot of private industry for a long time, and like we've been allowing private industry to make all the money, to take all the risks, but like when the risks go negative for them, like we back them up, and so that's not really free enterprise. So we could talk about regulations for that. But where I always go with this is, and like what you pointed out, the reason that U.S. companies do really, really well versus other companies is that it doesn't generally work too well when the government's too involved in a business because, it's just not the fastest, most efficient way of doing things. And that's why Venezuela's like state oil company is going bankrupt, even though they have all these, these resources, is because they're getting kind of plugged for the government. So, by and large, I'm not supportive of this.
Yeah, it's another like it's just another chink in the armor for me. If this was in a vacuum and this is the only part, like if otherwise this was a quote unquote normal presidency, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, but if it works and it helps, then cool. But like, put your tin hat on for a minute and like get your conspiracy theorists like blood flowing. Like, okay, so let me get this right. You're gonna kneecap universities and legal institutions that might oppose you. You're gonna tease that you're gonna run for a third term in 2028, and they have hats now that he rolled out this week to say, Trump 2028. Some people say, oh, he's just joking about that. But he's joked about a lot of stuff that actually he ended up doing. So, you got, again, like masked police snatching people off the street and praising Putin and criticizing the democratic leader of Ukraine. And this, I don't know. It's just like you put it all together and it's like, man, I don't know, man. It just feels a lot like he's and you're putting troops on the streets of DC, and we didn't mention it, but Chicago, he's already said Chicago's next. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like at some point you got to say time out. This is too much like, Mussolini in the 30s.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think anybody that's paying any sort of attention, like, is seeing this. The part that always bothers me is how quiet everybody is. Like, the time for moral compromise has passed. It's time to speak up. It's time to be, to put on your big boy and big girl pants and to frankly just stand up and be counted. Like, we're past the point of like, well, create some sort of justification for why this affront is something that we can compromise with this little bit of a time. Like, it keeps going that direction.
Oh, by the way, the other stat that I saw this week was, I've been pretty sanguine on the Supreme Court. I didn't realize this, but there's I guess there's just a bunch of Supreme Court decisions that roll through that I don't see. But the stat I saw was, estimates were that he was going to get like 3 out of 10 things that he asked for, and he's getting more like 7 out of 10 things that he asked for. So, the non-10 hat version of this, it would be that he's, they're saving their powder for like opposing him on things that really matter. That's like, if you really want to, I guess I should not change my metaphor. If you want to put your positive pants on, that's what you would be saying. The negative pants is like, holy shit, they're giving him basically everything. They're only opposing him on very starkly contested things. So anyway, I just saw that stat. It was just another.
All the institutions, there is no institution that has withstood kind of this, decade-long onslaught against its legitimacy. We see that with the National Guard being deployed. Why are there no military leaders speaking up for that? Even like the trans troop things, right? Where there were trans folks in the Air Force that are being forced out. I can disagree with that. I do disagree with that very strongly, but nonetheless, they were promised a retirement. Not a single member of the Air Force chain of command has stood up and said, no, you shouldn't steal their retirement from them. They honorably served for 15 years and we're forcing them out. Nobody's standing up. And I don't nothing at the point of like the institutions or the court or somebody else, somebody will stop. That somebody is you if you're listening. That somebody is you right now. Wherever you are, go figure out something that you can do. Moving away from Trump just a little bit, though, to like kind of talk about this, which is, I'd be curious what your thoughts are on, in these national security, like centralized industries, like we need them, right? What is kind of the right model for backstopping that risk, right? Because otherwise, if the public always takes all the risk and they get to take all the profit, that ain't cool either, right? And so, one of the things I thought back in the 2008 timeframe, which is that if we're going to loan all this money to these companies, then maybe there is a position for like a short term like position on the board. Maybe it's not like ownership of the company per se, but like until the loan is paid off, you are a pretty major stakeholder in that point. And it's worth pointing out that was money well spent. Like all those loans that we gave to GM and to Chrysler, Stellantis now I think is the name. Like the government made money on those in the long run, right? And then once the loan is off, they should be off. Like, so there probably needs to be some controls that way. But if the government is taking an ownership position, that just doesn't quite feel right for a lot of reasons. I mean, do you have any thoughts about like what's a better mode in order to kind of balance the risk profile?
I think debt is the right answer here. You do want, you want the federal government to earn some money on the cash that it puts into the deal. That's fine. Ownership, though, having equity ownership is about control. It's about like debt providers don't get to say what happens in the company. So why not structure this as debt? The answer is like, equity is more expensive than debt, generally speaking, but it comes with more privileges. You get more say in what happens in the company. You get voting rights on who's in the board. You get a long-term outlook that you otherwise don't get with debt. And I would argue that none of those things should be involved Like government should do what government is good at. And like have an argument about what government's good at. A lot of my conservative buddies will say government's not good at anything. Well, then fine, then keep government out of private industry too. But I digress. Even if you think government is good at some things, like government should not be in the business of owning and therefore controlling or having a voting interest in like who's on the board of private companies. Government should do what government does. This is why we have agreed that capitalism is the way forward. And if you want evidence of how this can get bastardized, China is probably the easiest example of this. I will not take investment from a Chinese venture capital firm because it comes with a bunch of strings that I don't want. It is necessarily tied back to the Chinese government. Think about that if you're making a and this is, again, like put your negative pants on, put your tin hat on. Like if you're in the computer industry and you're looking at whether you do a deal with Intel or somebody else, and Uncle Sam is 20% owner of Intel and Trump is running the US government, does that change your buying decision at all? Are you then going to make an uneconomic decision because of who owns? Those things happen all the time, by the way. Like, I'm going to make a decision to go with this company instead of that company because of who's on that company's board or how they're strategically positioned. And even though they're offering me a higher price, strategically, overall, they're better for me. And so those kinds of calculations happen in corporate America all the time, but not when the government is sitting behind the control stick.
Yeah, 100%. One of the, I had an acquaintance that used to be in the C-suite of a Chinese-owned offshore oil company. And he said it was absolutely maddening because of the government connection there. Nobody wanted to... They were happy to let the company fail as long as it didn't make them look stupid. So if they could defend it because like the sector itself was doing this, and then like that was okay because they were given access to special places to live, special schools for their children, because they didn't create waves. Even though, like, as you know, he was looking at the books and like it was a decision point. We can either keep doing what we're doing and fail, or we can, go hard one way or hard the other way and have a better chance of success. But you have to choose. And what they chose was non-choice, let the company fail, because it was a way to protect their own personal privilege. And frankly, that's what happens when the government starts getting into ownership positions, and where you start having these broad societal things about like who's the approved person, like do they have approval of the central leadership. And that's kind of what we're doing with the selective prosecution and investigation, the military police all over the place. Like this is starting to feel a lot like what we've actually been accusing the Chinese of doing for years. Like we're kind of doing it better now. The other thing that I kind of think about there though, as a model, is maybe more like almost like an investor-owned utility. Right. Which is, because there's like a place there where like there's this public good where people, they have to deliver electricity, for example. And there's certain requirements, and there's like a public utilities commission associated with that. And so, we take some of the risk out of that because we give them a delivered expectation, but they also have to meet certain expectations of delivery themselves. You ever thought about that? I know you're kind of a utility guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's super regulated, and let me talk about how government's awful at certain things. Like I'm a pretty centrist person, left leaning sometimes. This is where I go more right leaning, is because the government gets involved in regulating utilities, it just becomes a big political mess. And I think it's actually a really astute point you're making, which is if you want the government to be in Intel, go look at how public utility commissions are run. It ends up being, rates being set by, who can wield the most political power behind the scenes. And it's based somewhat on like pricing and commercial factors, but just as much on who knew who won what campaign, who's sitting in what leverage, blah, 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 blah. And like, again, do you want socialism or capitalism? Public utility commissions would tell you you don't want the government involved in private companies.
Yeah, and it is worth pointing out there's no perfect solution here. There are some trade-offs, right? So the trade-off in the uh, less regulated sort of scenario is that for industries with national security requirements, then you're backstopping their risk. I think debt's probably a pretty good way to do that. Like when you backstop that risk, that they got to pay you back. But you also, there's probably some degree of regulation there where they can't get too far over their skis because, like, otherwise, like, if there's an unrestricted amount of liability only being held by the people of the United States, that ain't cool. So there's probably some degree of regulation associated with that. Um, so I wouldn't go hard that way, but I would go mostly that way. The alternative is you go full socialism, like like the Venezuelan oil company. There at least the people, for a short term were accruing the benefits of what was going on there. Even though like in the long term, they ended up like killing the goose that laid the golden egg. So, you can go hard that way, or you can do what we're doing here, which is the worst of both. Which is like there's unrestricted downside for the American people associated with this, and we don't have enough control in order to be able to put any of the upside for them, and that's
Yeah.
a bit of a problem for me.
Yeah, if you're that's to that point. Yeah, you're a minority investor. Yeah, usually a minority investor at 20% would be, as we say in the industry, in the back seat on you. But in this case, it's Uncle Sam. I'm assuming that even if you're 20% ownership, that is going to be out. Like your microphone's going to be bigger and you're going to have more influence. But you're right. I think, and that's not necessarily true.
I'm kind of curious. Do we even have the legal authority? I know we don't. We're in this post law. Is there a legal authority to be able to do this? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I feel like yes, but I don't know. That's beyond my. I would say after the financial crisis, we did all sorts of things, but that was mostly done through the Fed. There was big balance sheet allocations from the Fed that were some of them were equity based, but
there was also a $700 billion bill from Congress in the kind of the waning days of George W. Bush. So like they did have the legal authority for that. It was granted explicitly by Congress.
Yeah. I'm not sure though.
Yeah. The last story I kind of want to talk to you about today, and it's kind of talking on the intel sort of thing about like what we've been learning about the importance of microchips in warfare in Ukraine. And then also about like, despots that we tend to follow is the idea of Vladimir Putin came to Alaska the other day in order to talk about Ukraine. So it was held at Joint Base Richardson Elmendorf. They're kind of in the Anchorage area. It had Putin landed. There's some not great images of like U.S. servicemen and women like rolling out the red carpet literally on their knees, which is whoever the PAO for that base is, they probably should, like have their butt handed to them. Like that is just something we should not be literally rolling out the red carpet for a despot, with American troops. So there's that. But there was most notably, the person that wasn't there was Ukraine. Zelensky, Vladimir Zelensky wasn't in attendance. So we had a talks on peace without one of the major parties that were in the war. I don't know, man. Seems kind of like bullshit to me, right?
It was total capitulation. I mean, let me start by, I'll withhold a little judgment and say it's not over. But every sign, I mean, it's been 2 weeks since that happened, and every sign is that Putin has no desire to end the war. If you just look at what his negotiating position is, he's asking for more territory than they hold now, meaning he wants to get a bigger chunk of Ukraine than is currently occupied by Russian troops. Also, in the week after that meeting, he attacked a U.S. factory. A U.S. company has a factory in Western Ukraine, far from where the fighting usually happens, but Russia targeted that as though basically like a slap to the face of a Trump. Yeah, there's no signs. I mean, just from a diplomatic standpoint, again, my buddies in the State Department would say, like, if you look at what Putin wanted, he wanted, a meeting that brought him back into the fold, because for many years he's been sort of ostracized. He wanted no sanctions because he doesn't want his oil sanctioned. He wants to strengthen his negotiating position because he knows the Russian military can't take that additional land. If they do take it, it's likely to take years and years and years. So he didn't want a ceasefire, and he didn't want to agree to anything concrete that he couldn't get out of it. All right, so then that's what Putin wanted. What did Trump want? Trump went in saying he wanted a ceasefire. He wanted commitments from Putin to do certain things, to sit down and commit to timelines. And if you're like somebody on his prep team, you're thinking about like, get Putin to commit to some sort of red line, some sort of timeline, so that we can put a line in the sand and then hold him to account. He got none of that. Putin got everything he wanted. Trump got none of what he wanted. But look, it's what he did then is he brought the European leaders, including Zelensky, to the White House the next week. We'll see what happens from that. I am pretty skeptical. It seems to me that I don't know, but like Trump's mindset is just wrong. Let me finish on this point. It's just the mindset is, what he said to Zelensky during that one meeting in the White House, which is, you don't have all the cards. You don't have the cards right now. He's looking at Zelensky as, you're weak here. And my reaction to that is like, that's such bullshit. Zelensky by himself is weak. But Zelensky with the US and Europe behind him is not weak. So why are we negotiating? We're negotiating with Putin from that sort of weak position, asking Putin for things instead of saying like, look, motherfucker, I have the whole US military and the whole European military behind us. Fuck you. Get the fuck out of Ukraine and don't ever come back. Like, why does Trump, who's the super strong man, do that?
Yeah, it's worth talking about the fact that, like, from the U.S.'s position, the longer the war goes on, the better it is for us, right? Which is like Bashar al-Assad fell apart because like Russia could no longer prop him up. Russia has been purposely like throwing sand in the gears of international diplomacy for years and years and years in order to create their own position of power. And the longer that the war grinds on in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians destroy a third of the Russian bomber fleet, and kill or injure millions, literally millions of Russian conscripts at this point. It's a brutal butcher's bill, but it is effective for the long-term interests of the U.S. Government. So the only reason we'd want to stop this war is out of a sense of altruism, right? Which is that like the war needs to end, because like it is grinding through, millions of Russians and thousands, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. And this does have a cost, like in real human lives. So we only want to stop it for altruism, and or so that guy can win the same award that the black guy won, because he's quite, thirsty for that Nobel Peace Prize. That's it. Those are the reasons to do it. Now, I think the altruism's enough, right? But if the altruism's enough, there needs to be a consequence to Russia for doing this, right? Which is not like, we don't start from this position of weakness, Mr. Art of the Deal. We start from a position of strength. And the strength is we'll grind you to fucking dust for the next decade, just like we did in Afghanistan. And you know what? It's going to suck. And you are going to end up dead at the end of it. That's what's going to happen, because when you grind through enough of your population, they're going to kill you. Right? So like, that's the position we have. And the Ukrainians, they're not ready to walk away. So like, there's no reason that we need to be doing this in order to preserve, the part of our ally here.
Yeah. Did you see this? Actually was shocking. There was a poll on Ukrainians and Zelensky going to this recent summit with Europeans. And they the poll was essentially like, are you worried about Zelensky being too lenient and giving away too much, agreeing to a deal that gives up eastern parts of Ukraine, like the Donbass? Or are you worried about Zelensky carrying on the war and being, too not doing enough to end the war? And it was like shockingly, it was like 80-20. Zelensky, you better not be fucking weak. You better go there and stand up for Ukraine and don't give shit to Putin. And it was like, Jesus, like after 3 years of war, you would think that the Ukrainians would be tired of it. But they're like, no, fuck you, Putin. I was blown away by that. Blown away.
It's the power of a free people. Like when they start believing in the importance of and the moral cause of what they're doing, they're resolute, and we should not be abandoning them, and we shouldn't be making their lives harder. We should be making their lives easier. And so, it's just not it's shit negotiation, even in the best case scenario, of like assuming that there's, he's doing it for altruistic reasons, not just for self glorification. I also kind of question about like, why the fuck was it in Alaska? Why is this in America? Like,
I know, man.
Sorry, you couldn't meet somewhere else. Like, know. By the way, you should be arresting him if he's on American land. Like, he is an international criminal. You should have fucking detained him. He should be arrested and sent off for war crimes, because that's what he's done. And if you're not willing to do that when he steps foot on American property, don't have it on American property.
No, man, they were chummy. It was like a old fraternity reunion. I will also say, yeah, I think now that he's gotten that imagery, Putin, that's what he wanted. He wanted to look like a normal leader, welcomed back into the U.S. and getting the red carpet, and like, forget about all those people that I killed and all these wars that I've started and all the political opponents that I've thrown off of balconies. It's just like, but I mean, look, I'm subject to it too. I look at Putin now. It's like, oh, he looks normal. He looks like a good dude. He's just chumming it up with our president. No problem.
Got exactly what he wanted. And yeah, we're no closer to peace as a result for that. So, well, moving from that, let's go ahead and talk about our good, bads, and others. Maybe I thought I'd start today with kind of the goods. Last week, you and I had an opportunity to be on another show, Counterpoints, with our buddy Connor, talking about a little bit more lighter fare. We were talking about the it was the F-18 scene, as they were attacking the alien ship in Independence Day, and just kind of like the absurdity of it all. And it was kind of fun to be able to do like a live stream associated with it. It's worth pointing out, Counterpoints is also on the Valor Media Network. So you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. But I don't know, it was kind of fun to just do something where you and I were just like hanging out and not talking about how shitty our government is sometimes.
Yeah, it was fun. And also kind of, I think the word that came to my mind was a little ridiculous, but in a good way.
Yeah, it was a little ridiculous, but maybe lighthearted. Next time I might have a beer while we're doing it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So Connor, maybe we need to record a little bit later, so I'm not housed before lunch. We have that. The other, I was going to kind of double tap on the good here is that we had like a really nice vacation. We did a family backpacking trip into the San Juan Mountains outside of Durango. Super fun. Kids did really, really well. And I was so proud of them. Like the second day of hiking, we didn't go very far. It was only like 2.5 miles, but like it was if it was any more technical, I wouldn't call it backpacking. Like we were like 60% slopes, loose gravel, like really aggressive sort of stuff. It took us like 4 hours of hiking to get like 2.5 miles. Crossed over like 80 down trees. Like it was bushwhacking up into the Vestal Basin. To the point that a couple, younger men that were up there for like some rock climbing camps were like, "Whoa, good job, family!" For getting up there, and they didn't expect to see us up there. So, and the kids just, man, they troopered right through it. So I was super proud of them for that, and it's kind of fun to watch them grow up. The flip side of watching your kids grow up is that my son snuck out the other night. He's 11. And is for no reason other than to go like, ping-ponging around the neighborhood and explore it in the dark. And I kind of get it. I'm about the same age. I did that. I remember we were at my grandparents' place. They lived out in the country. And so like I snuck out to just, I don't know, just go see things. But, um, anyway, so like, spent an hour driving around looking for him, found him hiding behind a tree, you know, you get in this car right this minute, rah! So anyways, so he's learning a little bit of a lesson about what it's like to be grounded as a result. So
Oh man. Oh my goodness. Wow. I have an 11-year-old also. I'm not ready for that, man.
I,
But I snuck out too when I was a kid, so I get it.
yeah, I have to say I waited a little longer for like I snuck out a couple times like at my home growing up in Boise. But I was like
Yeah.
older at that point. It was to go like hang out with somebody. It wasn't to just go like run around the neighborhood in my pajamas, which is what this kid did. So it was just very much like you think you're grown up, but you're acting like a little boy here. So it's just kind of it's that funny age where like they're making leaps ahead in certain things, like this Eagle Scout like work project that he did, and then like other times you're like,
Yeah.
what on earth are you thinking, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So, and then my other I'm saying is I've been working pretty hard on creating this online course for people that are trying to figure out what's going on with like reporting around climate change. How does this all work? It can feel a little daunting and overwhelming. And so we created Acclimate Academy. For anybody that's listening, they can go to it. It's academy.acclimate.com. You can also get to it from the main site. And they're free courses. People that want to learn a little bit about it. So the first one, we're calling it the language of climate. So just really, how do you kind of remove some of the jargon, understand a little bit of some of the technical issues? We talk about scopes accounting. And then the one that we're going to be publishing here, probably about the time this video comes out, is going to be like reporting frameworks. So as you think about like all the different ways that you have to report, that can be a lot. It's this real alphabet soup of like TCFD or SBTI or GHG, like all these letters. And it's just like the acronyms can get really overwhelming really fast. And so just like how can we help people that aren't experts in this engage with it in a meaningful way without having to, spend a ton of money and a ton of time to develop something that's just kind of like it's important to their company, but it's not a central focus of their work. So the other part of it is I'm watching to see what the adoption of this is because it's a little bit laborious in order to be able to put these things together. But I think it really will help to add to the conversation there.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that's exciting. I'm not sure how much you get this, but I get a couple outreaches a month of people who, I mean, they've been an accountant their whole life or a lawyer their whole life or whatever. And they're just looking for more meaning. And they find that in our line of work, energy, climate, all of that. And yeah, I mean, I now have a Google Doc that's just full of links and, ways to learn more, ways to get involved, ways to do a career transition. And so I think what you're describing there is it's great. An online tool for people to like dip their toe in. The best example of this is My Climate Journey. There's a whole podcast and now investment fund around somebody who's just like, I want to do more with my life. And he created a podcast where he started interviewing. Anyway, I'm often, I think it's great. There are, a tool for people who want more, want to learn more, but don't know where to start. That's awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it. So yeah, we'll see if we're kind of pick up what we have with that. People do get a certificate as well of that they can share. So we'd encourage everybody to do that as well. So
yeah, thanks, dude.
How about you, man? What's going good in your life?
Well, so good. I spent, Saturday morning volunteering at the Dragon Kim Foundation. I've been doing that for a while. I was a mentor for one of the kids, and he, started with 600 applicants. They selected the top 63 to become projects, and then the top 10 presented this last Saturday. I'm like, this gives me hope for society. Let me just say it that way. There were a group of kids from Phoenix who had created on their own volition, like 3 kids created a CPR, choking hazard, swimming prevention, like drowning prevention, like a whole safety course, and just took it around to community centers around Phoenix. And they presented to hundreds of kids. Just, this is the kind of thing where you get a CPR card. They don't do CPR cards, but it's like safety awareness training for kids in various places. So that was one project. Another was a high school senior who wrote a book on morals and ethics and is teaching kids morals and ethics. Just like we're not getting enough civics education in classes today. So, and fewer people are going to religious institutions. And so you've got a bunch of kids who are just kind of like, how am I supposed to engage civically, and what is a moral? What is an ethic? And giving them, so she wrote a book. It's like, I wanted to take it home to my kid. I did. I took taking it home, and I started covering some of it with my kids, and I'll take them through the book over the next. Anyway, so these are the kinds of projects. And then the one that I was mentioning is like this kid who's been picking up fruit, go pick fruit trees and take it to homeless shelters. Like good stuff. Yeah. Gleaning. Yeah. Just like really good projects who are doing good in our communities. And it was just inspiring to be, these are high school, juniors and seniors, mostly just doing good stuff. Fun.
It's really powerful. I think about like the thing that probably got me into the Naval Academy was too often people feel like that they need infrastructure in order to be able to go do something in the world. They need to go join a nonprofit, or you don't need that. You can just go do a thing yourself right now, however old you are, even as a kid. As a 16-year-old, I started a concert series at my school for, I just wanted to look, it was like a battle of the bands sort of thing. And, but the profits all went to the income from it all went to nonprofits. Right. And so it was like this little community building thing. And like, I built an organization. It wasn't huge, but like, we brought in some real money, and it was leveraging some of the resources of the school. I had to interact with adults, very particularly a principal that was a little skeptical about it because 15 years prior, the last time they'd had like a live music event, they found somebody smoking weed, behind the boiler. And so like, how do you marshal resources, build this in order to make an impact on your community? Not nearly as cool as what you're doing, but like that taught me leadership. It brought me into this mindset of a lifetime of service. Like it changed the path of my life. And so I love what you're doing there, man. I'm glad of it, and I'm glad that finally somebody's talking to kids about like ethics and morality.
Yeah, I connected with her because I was like, look, however I can help your work, that's super important.
Yeah.
My bad this week is it's kind of just caught up to me unexpectedly. So we're at the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, where the hurricane that hit New Orleans and the southern Louisiana coast. For me, ironically, I wasn't in America, but I was in Ramadi in a crappy town in the Sunni Triangle. As a pilot, I did a flying tour in 2003 and 2007. In the middle, in 2005 and 6, I was a forward air controller in Ramadi, which was the shitty part of Iraq at the time. All the crappy fighting was happening right there. We were getting attacked 7 times a day with small arms, rocket-propelled grenades, mortars, all of the above, sometimes all at once. So it was a tough time.
I was going to say, hell of a way to party.
It was it was intense. I mean, I don't know how many people were following it at the time, but we had 15% casualties in the battalion. In like a 800 person battalion, we had 14 KIA. Like this was not a friendly place to be. And I think the reason this all caught up with me is that like I was in Ramadi looking at our TV feeds about what's happening in Katrina at the time. So I connect these two things in my brain, and it is really crazy for me to think that Ramadi was 20 years ago, because those experiences that were so formative in my life they feel like they were 5 minutes ago, not 20 years ago.
Yeah, it must be. I didn't have that experience. All my stuff was, come back aboard the ship and get myself some ice cream. So like that was, I've had losses in my military service, but I didn't have like that direct in your face kind of direct amount of exposure there. And it must have been, I think if I were in a similar scenario like that, I would wonder, and I'm, maybe putting words in your mouth here, so push back if I'm wrong. I would wonder, is what I'm doing here worth it? Like, am I, like, is this where we need to be spending our time and our resources if we can't like take care of our own people? Um,
Yeah,
I don't know what your thoughts are there.
I went through a range of emotions there. I remember, this is a whole other topic. We can maybe put a pin in it and come back to it. But, before the 2003 invasion, I remember writing in my journal about WMD. By this 2005 timeframe, we were pretty sure it didn't exist. And so what the hell were we doing? At that point, I was feeling really responsible for effing up Iraq. And this was in part a way to try to put it back together a little bit. We were serving alongside Iraqi army. There were, we were still blowing shit up, but in the spirit of trying to provide some sort of order and then rebuild it. But there's a lot to unpack there, and it was not going our way.
I think the thing that's most interesting out of what you just said there is that your sense of like, what were you, a captain at the time in 2003? So like you'd been in your career for like 5-6 years maybe at this point, right? And that you had a sense of personal responsibility to a country whose flag you weren't wearing because of the actions of the country whose flag you were wearing. And I think that's just like an important point that like I would like call on all veterans, but people broadly as well. But it's to sense of like that personal responsibility that, if you're proud of being an American, you should also maybe be a little ashamed when it does something stupid. And that like you should take a little ownership of what you're doing in your name, even if you weren't the one that made the call. So anyways, I commend you for thinking that way, even though that's maybe a heavier burden than we really should be asking of somebody that's, in their mid-20s and without a ton of authority.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I'll also go one step further. It was also personal in that, this is crazy, but I was bombing a bunch of different towns in 2003. One of them was Al-Qut, which is on the way up to Baghdad on the southeastern side of Baghdad. Turns out there was one of the Iraqi army soldiers that I was serving with in a Ramadi was in Al-Qut in the Iraqi army at the time. And we did the math and like figured out what days I was there. And like, I bombed him in 2003.
Man, that's intense.
And but we were brothers by 2002 years later, like 2 years and a couple of months later, we were like side by side getting shot at by some other insurgents. And if you want to, like, I always wondered why old Vietnam vets wanted to go back and meet the Viet Cong folks that they fought against. This totally crystallized it all for me. It wasn't, but we were just in a spot where we were asked to do a job and doing that job as best we could. And, him on his side, me on my side. And then we found ourselves in a very different position, working towards a peace. And anyway, he also would talk about his family still back in Al-Qut. He was, anyway, there's also a lot more to unpack here, but he had to come in. He didn't live he had to spend months and months away from his family just like I did. So there was a lot of shared experience there.
He deployed internal to his country. Yeah. Man, that's intense. Thanks for sharing that.
All right. My other is, I was listening to a podcast with Mike Flood on it. Mike Flood is a congressman from Nebraska. And he gave me a little hope. I'll say this, like, I am really disappointed in Congress right now. His podcast was about how he's still doing town halls despite the heat that he's getting. Because look, the One Big Beautiful Bill, HR1, whatever you want to call it, is awful for people on the bottom side of the economic spectrum. It is a giveaway to the richest among us. It is going to reapportion wealth from the lowest third to the highest third. Those of us in the middle are going to get like a 0.01 for tax benefit. So there's a little bit of a tax benefit for you and me. But most people see this as like, oh, not good for the vast majority of Americans. So he's getting a lot of heat at his town halls, but he's still doing it. And his comment that stuck with me is that I have more, this is him talking, I have more in common with that woman in the crowd screaming at me than the person on the couch potato who doesn't give a shit. It's like, really interesting perspective, man. Like, I get that. Like, I argue with my conservative brothers and sisters, those in the military, those that are just, my family from, the Midwest. And it's a good reminder that, like, where we are is awful, but maybe not as bad as apathy. So I want to see where this goes, because Mike Flood he's in a district where he probably should get voted out in a normal time, but maybe his approach will get him. I mean, he's a Republican. He voted for all the Republican stuff and he supports the president. I'm like, man, I don't see his perspective. I think he's wrong on a number of things. But I can very much appreciate that he has conviction about what he's saying, and he's in the fight and he's willing to have the conversation. And I respect that.
I do appreciate the fact that he is continuing to have town halls. I think that's like the bare minimum, frankly, of behaviors, but very few people do it. So it's apparently no longer the bare minimum. So I'll give him some credit there. I would also love to see him speak up about things like, for example, the Texas redistricting. As a guy that kind of, works and operates in a swing district and is probably feeling that pressure, he needs to be standing up for swing districts, even if it's not his swing district a little bit. So I'd love to kind of see that, but yeah, there's a couple of people, that continue to stand up and try to kind of like to speak up and to do that public service component of it. When I was doing my board stuff at Veterans for Responsible Leadership, it was about trying to empower those people in order to kind of like stand up, like that middle, like standing up for the right thing to do. But it turns out there weren't that many. So, so let's hope that, this, pardon the pun, this trickle of good news here begets a flood. So, I'd love to see that public servant mindset continue to positively infect, everybody in Congress, rather than focusing on retreating to your corners. All right.
You going to read us out again this week?
Yeah, why not? So that's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening, everybody, and for being part of the conversation around energy, national security, the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, if you're feeling generous, please share it on social media or send it to someone who would appreciate it. Once again, thanks again for joining us. Hardpoints is produced by Jordan Garuso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. We'll see you next week, or see you in 2 weeks. Peace.